The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Tonopah, Nevada, when Katherine Simmons collapsed beside the white picket fence surrounding the small wooden church, her tears falling freely onto the dusty ground. The year was 1878, and in a town built on silver mines and broken dreams, Katherine had just lost the last thing keeping her tethered to hope. Through her blurred vision, she barely registered the approaching figure, tall and imposing against the setting sun, until his shadow fell across her bent form. "You're still here," the cowboy said, his voice low and measured. "That's something." Katherine looked up, startled by the unexpected words. The man before her was lean and weathered, with kind eyes that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. His name was Jacob Irving, though most folks in Tonopah just called him Irving, or that quiet cowboy who worked the Miller Ranch. She quickly wiped at her tear-stained cheeks, embarrassed to be found in such a state. "I'm sorry," she managed to say, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to. I should go." "No need to apologize," Jacob replied, extending his hand to help her up. "Everyone needs a good cry now and then, especially in a place like this." Katherine hesitated before accepting his help. His calloused palm was warm against her smaller hand as he gently pulled her to her feet. The simple human contact, the first she'd experienced in days, nearly broke her composure again. "Thank you, Mr. Irving." "Jacob Irving." He released her hand and adjusted his worn hat. "And you're Katherine Simmons, right? The schoolteacher who came from Boston last spring." Surprise flickered across her face. "How did you know?" A small smile tugged at his lips. "Small town. Not much happens here that folks don't talk about. Plus, my niece Hannah speaks mighty highly of you." Katherine nodded, remembering the bright-eyed girl with braided hair who sat in the front row of her classroom. "Hannah is a wonderful student." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of a piano playing in the saloon down the street. "If you don't mind me asking," Jacob finally said, his eyes gentle with concern, "what's got you crying by the church on a Tuesday evening?" Katherine's throat tightened. She rarely shared her troubles, having learned early in life that self-reliance was the surest path. But something in Jacob's steady gaze made her want to speak the truth. "I received a letter today. The school board has decided to close the schoolhouse. Insufficient funds, they say." She looked down at her hands. "They've given me until the end of the month, and then, well, I have nowhere to go. I spent everything I had to come out here." Jacob frowned. "That doesn't seem right. Those children need schooling." "Apparently not as much as the town needs a new gambling hall," Katherine replied bitterly. "The money that was allocated for the school's operation has been redirected." "Tanner," Jacob muttered, his jaw tightening. "Has to be Richard Tanner's doing. Man's been buying up half the town since that new silver vein was found." Katherine nodded. "Mr. Tanner made it clear that a proper lady like myself should consider more suitable options than teaching. He even suggested I might find employment at his new establishment." Jacob's expression darkened. "That's not right." "No," she agreed softly. "It's not." The church bell rang, marking 6 o'clock, and Katherine straightened her shoulders. "I should go? Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Irving." As she turned to leave, Jacob called after her. "Miss Simmons." She paused, looking back at him. "The Miller Ranch is hosting a community dinner this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just neighbors coming together. Might do you good to be around folks who care about more than silver and gambling halls." Katherine hesitated, then nodded. "Perhaps I will. Thank you." Jacob watched her walk away, her spine straight despite the burden she carried. Something about her quiet dignity stirred him. He'd seen too many people come to Tonopah with dreams, only to leave broken and disillusioned. For some reason he couldn't explain, he didn't want Katherine Simmons to become one of them. The Miller Ranch sat nestled in a small valley 3 miles outside of Tonopah. It wasn't the grandest spread in Nevada, but the main house was solid, and the land yielded enough to keep the family comfortable. When Katherine arrived on Saturday evening, she was surprised by the number of wagons and horses gathered outside. She smoothed her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days, and approached the house with trepidation. Before she could knock, the door swung open, and Hannah Irving rushed out. "Miss Simmons, you came." The 11-year-old grabbed her hand. "Uncle Jake said you might, but I wasn't sure." Katherine smiled, genuinely touched by the child's enthusiasm. "I promised I would, didn't I? Come on in." Everyone's out back. Hannah pulled her through the house, chattering excitedly about the food and music. The miller's backyard had been transformed into a festive gathering space. Lanterns hung from trees, tables groaned under the weight of home-cooked dishes, and a small group of musicians played lively tunes while couples danced on a makeshift wooden platform. "There's Uncle Jake." Hannah pointed toward a group of men standing near the barn. Jacob looked different out of his work clothes. His dark hair was combed back, and his clean shirt made his shoulders appear even broader. He caught sight of her and excused himself from his companions. "Miss Simmons," he greeted her with a nod. "Glad you could make it. Thank you for inviting me. It's livelier than I expected. Folks around here don't get many chances to celebrate," he explained. "When we do, we make the most of it." Katherine was about to respond when a distinguished-looking couple approached them. The woman embraced Jacob warmly before turning her attention to Katherine. "You must be the schoolteacher Hannah talks about constantly," she said. "I'm Emma Miller, and this is my husband, George. Welcome to our home." "Thank you for having me," Katherine replied, shaking their hands. "Your ranch is beautiful. Been in the family for 3 generations now," George said proudly. "Not as flashy as some, but it's good, honest land." Emma linked her arm through Katherine's. "Jacob tells us you're having some trouble with the school board. Terrible business, that. The children need their education." Katherine shot Jacob a surprised look, but he merely shrugged. "Emma knows everything that happens within 50 miles, he explained. "No point keeping secrets." "Well, I hope you'll let us help," Emma continued. "George is on good terms with several influential people in the territory." "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Emma interrupted. "This community takes care of its own. Now, have you eaten? The food's getting cold, and I won't have a guest going hungry at my table." Before Katherine could protest further, she found herself being led to the buffet tables and introduced to what seemed like half the population of Tonopah. For the first time since receiving the devastating letter, she felt a spark of hope. Later, as the evening cooled and the stars emerged in the desert sky, Katherine found herself seated on a bench at the edge of the gathering. The dancing continued, but she was content to observe, grateful for the momentary respite from her worries. "Not much for dancing." Jacob's voice startled her from her thoughts as he settled beside her, offering a cup of lemonade. "Thank you." She accepted the drink. "And it's not that. I enjoy dancing very much, actually. It's just been a while." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Boston seems a long way from here." "Sometimes it feels like another lifetime," she admitted. "I came west because I wanted adventure, independence. My parents didn't approve they had arranged a match with the son of a business associate." "So you ran away?" Katherine smiled wryly. "I prefer to think of it as pursuing my calling. Teaching has always been my passion, and when I saw the advertisement for a schoolteacher in Nevada territory, it seemed like providence." Jacob studied her for a moment. "Takes courage to leave everything familiar behind." "Or foolishness," she countered, looking down at her worn shoes. "I'm beginning to wonder if they were right. Perhaps I was too headstrong, too convinced of my own importance." "No," Jacob said firmly. "You did something that mattered. Those children, including my niece, have learned more from you in months than they might have in years without a proper teacher." The conviction in his voice warmed something inside her. "Thank you for saying that." The music shifted to a slower melody, and Jacob stood, extending his hand. "Would you care to dance, Miss Simmons?" Katherine hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I'd like that, Mr. Irving." They joined the other couples on the dance floor, Jacob's hand resting lightly at her waist as they moved to the gentle rhythm. He was surprisingly graceful for such a tall man, and Katherine found herself relaxing into the dance. "I heard something interesting from George earlier," Jacob said, careful to keep his voice low. "Apparently Richard Tanner's been buying up mining claims that haven't produced in years." Katherine's brow furrowed. "Why would he do that?" "That's what's curious. These aren't just any claims, they're specifically along the eastern ridge. No one's found silver there in over a decade. Perhaps he knows something others don't." Jacob nodded. "That's my thinking. And I'm wondering if it has anything to do with the sudden urgency to redirect the school's funding." Katherine considered this. "You think there might be a connection between the school closure and these mining claims?" "I think Tanner doesn't make moves without a reason," Jacob replied. "And I think we ought to find out what that reason is." The music ended, but neither moved immediately to break apart. Katherine realized with a start how comfortable she felt in Jacob's presence, how natural it seemed to be planning and problem-solving together. "I should probably return to town soon," she said reluctantly. "It's getting late." "I'll drive you," Jacob offered. "The roads aren't safe after dark." Katherine wanted to protest that she could manage, but the genuine concern in his eyes stopped her. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." As they said their goodbyes to the Millers, Emma pulled Katherine aside. "Come for tea tomorrow afternoon," she insisted. "I've had some thoughts about your situation." "I will," Katherine promised, touched by the woman's kindness. The ride back to Tonopah was peaceful, the wagon moving steadily under a canopy of stars. Jacob pointed out constellations, telling her the stories his Paiute friend had shared about the night sky. Katherine found herself laughing at his descriptions, momentarily forgetting her troubles. When they reached the modest boarding house where she rented a room, Jacob helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "It was exactly what I needed." "The pleasure was mine, Miss Simmons." He paused, seeming to debate something internally before continuing. "Would you allow me to call on you tomorrow? I have some ideas about investigating Tanner's dealings that might benefit from a schoolteacher's perspective." Katherine smiled, surprised by how much she looked forward to seeing him again. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Irving." As she watched him drive away, Katherine realized that for the first time since arriving in Tonopah, she felt truly connected to something bigger than her own struggles. Perhaps this wild, unpredictable land had something to offer her after all. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to her word, Emma Miller had rallied several influential friends to protest the school closure. George Miller discovered that the school board's decision had been made without proper procedure, which bought them additional time. And Jacob, with his quiet determination, had begun piecing together information about Tanner's mysterious land purchases. Katherine found herself at the center of an unexpected movement. Parents whose children attended her school organized a town meeting, expressing their outrage at the board's decision. Former students spoke eloquently about the importance of education. Even the local newspaper published an editorial questioning the wisdom of closing the only school in a growing community. Through it all, Jacob remained steadfastly at her side, offering support, suggestions, and occasionally a shoulder to lean on. Their partnership evolved naturally, his practical knowledge of the territory complementing her organizational skills and eloquence. One afternoon, a week after the dinner at the Miller's ranch, Jacob arrived at the schoolhouse with an excited gleam in his eye. Katherine had just dismissed her students and was erasing the chalkboard when he appeared in the doorway. "I think I found something," he announced without preamble. Katherine set down the eraser. "About Tanner?" Jacob nodded, approaching her desk and unfolding a weathered map. "I spoke with an old prospector named Wilkins who used to work the eastern claims. He showed me this." Katherine leaned closer, studying the faded lines and markings. "What am I looking at?" "Water," Jacob said simply. "Underground springs that feed into a river system beneath the eastern ridge. Wilkins discovered them while digging for silver, but kept it quiet because he was more interested in minerals than water rights." Understanding dawned on Katherine's face. "And with the drought conditions these past 2 years, water could be more valuable than silver," Jacob confirmed, "especially to the ranchers and farmers in the valley. If Tanner controls those springs, he controls the entire region's agricultural future," Katherine finished, stunned by the implications. Jacob rolled up the map carefully. "Exactly. And I'm betting he wants to build that gambling hall on the school property because it sits directly above one of the main access points to the underground river." Katherine's mind raced. "We need to bring this to the town council immediately." "Already arranged," Jacob said with a grin. "Meeting set for tomorrow morning. Wilkins will be there to testify about the water sources." Katherine impulsively threw her arms around him. "Jacob, this is brilliant." Surprised by her spontaneous embrace, Jacob hesitated briefly before his arms encircled her, holding her close. The feeling was so right, so perfect, that Katherine found herself reluctant to pull away. When she finally did, their faces were mere inches apart, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Katherine," he said softly, using her given name for the first time, A knock at the schoolhouse door broke the moment. They stepped apart quickly as Hannah burst into the room, chattering about a science experiment she wanted to show her uncle. Katherine turned away, her cheeks flushed, heart racing at what had almost happened. The town council meeting the next day was unlike any Tonopah had ever seen. The small town hall was packed to capacity, with people standing along the walls and spilling out onto the porch. Richard Tanner sat at the front, his usual confident smirk fading as Wilkins testified about the underground water sources and Jacob presented their evidence of Tanner's systematic land purchases. When it was Katherine's turn to speak, she stood tall, addressing not just the council but the entire community. This town was built by people who understood the value of resources: silver, yes, but also knowledge, community, and foresight, she began. The children I teach every day represent Tonopah's future. They deserve better than to have their education sacrificed for one man's greed. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mr. Tanner would have you believe that prosperity comes only from gambling halls and saloons. But true prosperity, she continued, her voice gaining strength, comes from educated citizens, from fair access to natural resources, and from leaders who place community welfare above personal gain. The room erupted in applause, drowning out Tanner's attempts to interrupt. By the end of the 3-hour meeting, the council had voted to rescind the school closure, establish a committee to investigate water rights, and place a moratorium on new construction until proper surveys could be completed. As the crowd dispersed, Katherine found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Parents thanked her for standing up for their children's education. Council members who had previously avoided her now sought her opinion on educational matters. Even the newspaper editor requested an interview for a feature article. Through it all, she kept searching the crowd for Jacob, but he seemed to have disappeared. Disappointment settled in her chest as she finally made her way outside, only to find him waiting by her buggy, holding the reins of his horse. "I thought we might celebrate," he said, a warm smile lighting his features. "There's a place up in the foothills I'd like to show you, if you're willing." Katherine didn't hesitate. "I'd love to." The ride took them through the sage-covered hills beyond town, following a narrow trail that climbed steadily higher. Jacob rode beside her buggy, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his years in the territory. As they crested a rise, a breathtaking vista opened before them. The entire valley spread out below, with Tonopah nestled like a toy town in the distance. "It's beautiful," Katherine whispered, taking in the sweeping landscape. "This is where I come when I need perspective," Jacob said, helping her from the buggy. "When things get too complicated down below." He spread a blanket on a flat rock and unpacked a simple picnic: bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a bottle of cider. They sat together, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I never thanked you properly," Katherine said after a comfortable silence. "For everything you've done." Jacob shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. You're the one who stood up there today and changed everyone's minds. That took real courage." "I wouldn't have had the chance without you," she insisted. "When you found me crying by the church fence that day, I was at my lowest point. I was ready to give up, to admit defeat and return east." "And now?" he asked, his eyes intent on her face. Katherine smiled, looking out over the valley. "Now I feel like I've finally found where I belong." Jacob's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with her own. "I felt that way the first time I saw this view, like something inside me just settled." They sat in companionable silence, watching the shadows lengthen across the landscape. Katherine was acutely aware of Jacob's presence beside her, of the warmth of his hand holding hers, of the unspoken feelings growing between them. "Katherine," he said finally, turning to face her. "I've never been much good with words, but I need to tell you something." Her heart quickened at the serious note in his voice. "Yes. These past weeks, working with you, getting to know you, it's changed something in me." He paused, searching for the right words. "I've been on my own a long time. Didn't think I needed anyone else. But now, the thought of going back to that life, a life without you in it, I can't imagine it." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. "Jacob, you don't have to say anything," he rushed on. "I know it's sudden. I know you came west for independence." Not to. She silenced him by placing her free hand against his cheek. "Jacob Irving, If you think for one moment that my desire for independence means I don't want you in my life, then you haven't been paying attention. Relief flooded his features, followed by something deeper, more profound. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward until his lips met hers in a gentle kiss that spoke of promise and possibility. When they parted, Katherine kept her hand on his face, memorizing every detail of this moment: the fading light, the distant call of a night bird, the look in Jacob's eyes that told her more clearly than words ever could that she was cherished. "I think I've been waiting for you my whole life," he said softly, "even when I didn't know it." Katherine smiled, her heart full to bursting. "Then it's a good thing I decided to cry by that particular church fence." Jacob laughed, pulling her closer. "That's something indeed." The months that followed brought many changes to Tonopah. The investigation into water rights led to new regulations ensuring fair access for all landowners. Richard Tanner, his schemes exposed, sold his properties and left town under a cloud of scandal. The school not only remained open but expanded, with funding secured for a proper building to replace the one-room structure where Katherine had taught. Through it all, Jacob and Katherine's relationship deepened. They faced challenges together: skeptics who thought a cowboy and a schoolteacher made an odd match, practical matters of blending their very different lives, and occasionally, their own stubborn natures. But each obstacle only strengthened the bond between them. On a crisp autumn day, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, Jacob brought Katherine back to the church where he'd found her crying. This time, however, he led her inside rather than lingering by the fence. The simple sanctuary was filled with flowers, and their friends the Millers, Hannah, Wilkins, and many others waited in the pews, smiling knowingly. "What's all this?" Katherine asked, though the hope rising in her chest told her she already knew. Jacob took both her hands in his, dropping to one knee on the worn wooden floor. "Katherine Simmons, you came west seeking adventure and independence. I'm not asking you to give up either of those things. In fact, I'm asking to join you in them." He withdrew a ring from his pocket, a simple silver band set with a small but perfect diamond. "This was my grandmother's. She was a pioneer woman who never let anyone tell her what she couldn't do. Reminded me of you from the moment I met you." Katherine's eyes filled with happy tears as Jacob continued. "I love your strength, your compassion, your determination. I love the way you fight for what matters and refuse to compromise your principles. I love the life we've started building together." He took a deep breath. "Katherine Simmons, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Jacob Irving. Nothing would make me happier." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, their friends erupted in cheers and applause. Emma Miller dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, while George clapped Jacob firmly on the back. Hannah danced excitedly in the aisle, and even old Wilkins looked suspiciously misty-eyed. They were married then and there, the local minister having been forewarned of Jacob's plans. As they spoke their vows beneath the simple wooden cross, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the refined drawing rooms of Boston to the wild beauty of Nevada, from a young woman seeking adventure to a woman who had found not only her purpose but her heart's companion. 2 years later, on a warm spring evening, Jacob and Katherine sat on the porch of their home, a sturdy cabin built on land adjoining the Miller Ranch. Katherine cradled their 3-month-old son, James, while Jacob rocked their daughter, Elizabeth, who at 18 months was already showing signs of her mother's determination and her father's quiet strength. "Letter came today," Jacob said, shifting Elizabeth to his shoulder as she dozed. "From the territorial governor. They've approved funding for the new school building. Construction starts next month." Katherine smiled, proud of the accomplishment. What had begun as a fight to save a small schoolhouse had evolved into a campaign for educational reform throughout the territory. Her articles on educational methodologies had been published in journals as far away as San Francisco, and she'd been invited to speak at a teachers' convention in Denver that fall. "We've come a long way," she said, looking out over the land they'd cultivated together, a garden bursting with vegetables, fruit trees beginning to blossom, pasture where their small herd of horses grazed peacefully. "Remember when I found you crying by that church fence?" Jacob asked, reaching over to take her free hand. "You thought you'd lost everything. Instead, I found everything I never knew I wanted, she replied, squeezing his fingers. A home, a purpose, a family. Jacob leaned over to kiss her softly. That's really something, Mrs. Irving. Indeed it is, Mr. Irving, she agreed, resting her head against his shoulder as the sun set over the mountains, painting the Nevada sky in hues of promise. Indeed it is.